All right, it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. Steven Lorentz re-signs, Mitch Marner traded. Now, Steve Dangle has already done a great video on Mitch Marner on the Steve Dangle channel, and you should definitely check that out. This one's going to be a little bit different because I think it speaks to what it's like to grow up in Toronto and want to be a Toronto Maple Leaf, which I'll be honest, I did. I didn't have hope in hell, but I wanted it. And there are so many of us that grew up wanting to be this. So few of us who get to be this. And we got two guys today in Steven Lorentz and Mitch Marner who are just like us. They wanted to be this. They wanted to be Toronto Maple Leafs. One is staying, one is leaving. And I think the leaving part is sad. It's a bit of a tragedy, actually. But we can't fully judge how things are going to go until about 5 years from now. I'm going to get to that in a second because I've actually taken your submissions to make this video. But first, let's start with Steven Lorentz, who signed for 3 years today, $1.35 million, just at that, if you don't make the team, it's buriable line. But it also gives him a little bit of security. And this is a Brad Treliving special. The guy loves a longer-term, small amount of money contract. You see it with Simon Benoit, you've seen it with Bobby McMahon, and you're now seeing it with Steven Lorentz. And it keeps salaries down for role players like Steven Lorentz, like Simon Benoit, like Bobby McMahon. And as the cap goes up, at least you know the bottom of your roster. You got some reliable people that you can put out there, high character, high effort, maybe not the highest skill at the NHL level, but they're going to give you good, solid minutes when the Stars are off the ice. Now, Steven Lorentz talked to the media today, and he said something that I thought was really kind of beautiful. He said, in my heart, I knew I wanted to come back. And he said his number one goal, I mean, they all say this, number one goal is to be a Toronto Maple Leaf and bring the cup back to Toronto. And to compare and contrast, Mitch Marner's always said the same thing as well. And that's why I think it's super interesting. Mitch Marner grew up a Toronto Maple Leaf fan. This is a guy who wanted to be here, was dying to get drafted by this team, was drafted by this team, and leaves the team with some pretty unbelievable records to his name, right? In the time that he was here, he was nothing short of historically good. There is no debate. It is perfectly, like, it's enshrined in history. He's a top 10 scorer Leaf all time. He had some incredible moments, and there was a lot of heartbreak too. And I think that the heartbreak finally got to him. But, I mean, that's the heartbreak of being a Leaf fan, isn't it? Now, when it comes to Steven Lorentz, very different player from Mitch Marner. So the only thing I'm really comparing here is what it's like to be a fan of the team and grow up and want to be there. And let's just talk a little bit about Steven Lorentz's role on this team before we get to the Mitch Marner stuff. Steven Lorentz is going to be a fourth line guy for the entire time he's here. And that's not a bad thing. That's a really good thing. The Toronto Maple Leafs clearly see this guy as a guy who is a high character, high effort individual, the kind of person that you need, the energy that you need on your team. And beyond all that, he's also not afraid to take a step back, sit out a game, not going to mope about it, probably not going to love it, but it's not going to mope about it, not going to bring the team down. This is a team that very clearly is in transition and needs to find depth. If you look at the teams that have done great, the Dallases, I would say Florida's obvious. You look at the depth Edmonton got through the playoffs. You look at some of those New York Ranger teams, the Tampa Bay Lightning teams, Vegas when they won. All of those teams had great depth. It wasn't just the Stars. And so when the Stars couldn't show up in the playoffs, and that happens because, you know, every team's good in the playoffs, the depth can. You're trying to give yourself, when you're putting together a team, the most opportunity possible to win a game and to win a game when it counts. And if you've got depth that's got the right attitude, that might be able to score you like a miraculous Simon Benoit overtime goal, don't worry, I haven't forgotten. I mean, that's kind of the best case scenario. And look at what the Florida Panthers had with their fourth line throughout this run. Steven Lorentz, I think the Leafs believe, is a part of what this new look bottom six is going to be like. Now, part of the issue the Leafs have had in the past is they had a lot of money wrapped up in four guys. Those four guys were otherworldly good. But the problem was you couldn't really surround them with the rest of the guys because the cap got flat, COVID happened, a lot of pressure on the guys making a ton of money, and the guys who weren't, when they didn't produce, it was like, well, what's the best you can expect with them? So Steven Lorentz, Scott Laughton, those guys are character guys, different skill sets, different levels of skill, probably different lines. But again, I think you see those two pieces as cornerstones of what is next from the Leafs bottom six. Now, when we get to Mitch Marner, who grew up a Leafs fan, wanted to come here, wanted to be here, signed an extra 6 years to stay here, obviously, right out of his ELC. We all remember that contract negotiation. It's a tragedy. Lorentz being here and excited about being a Leaf, that's great. That's what you want to build in Toronto. But what we saw at the end of the second round, when the Leafs were ultimately eliminated, was the Florida Panthers go to town on the fans and the media and how shitty it is to play in Toronto. They did. They trolled us. They won. They have the right to do that. What the Toronto Maple Leafs need to do is build a culture of, why wouldn't you want to play here? And a great model for that is Florida. With Mitch Marner leaving, the tragedy is that it didn't work. The tragedy is that he goes and there is a bitter aftertaste, not just from him and his camp, but also for a lot of Leaf fans and media too. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. And I think the frustration will ultimately boil down to, as the years kind of wear away the rawness of this, why didn't this work? What happened? And, I think there's a lot of things that played into that. I think the number one thing is the negotiation in 2018, 2019 didn't go well. I think that you had a definite strategy of negotiating through the media. I think that Toronto fans are pragmatic enough to go, that person is otherworldly and should get paid like it. But they also don't appreciate when you're making $10+ million a year and you're saying you're underappreciated. And it's just the way it is. Now, was that the Marner camp's thought or desire throughout that negotiation or since then? I don't think so. I think that some of the things that the Leafs did really pissed off members of the Marner camp, and I think especially early on, the Mike Babcock stuff with the list and the putting him on the fourth line and all that crap, right? That was bad. And Lou Lamoriello stiffed them on the Schedule A bonuses in his ELC. We all know that story as well, and if you don't, well, basically they just said, we don't give those bonuses out, and then promptly gave them to Austin Matthews. I get why they're mad by that, but the Leafs made good. They paid him about $11 million a year for 6 years, gave him top line minutes, and he really came through. Mitch Marner was a spectacular regular season player, but like the rest of the core, for whatever reason, and I think depth is a part of it, they didn't get it done. So today we lose Mitch Marner. Today, officially, June 30th, 2025, Mitch Marner is not a Toronto Maple Leaf, and we haven't been able to say that since 2015 when he was drafted. And I think that's sad. It's been 10 years. And what did we get out of those 10 years? A couple of second-round berths. That's it. That's a shame. And people are, rightly excited about the future today. Mitch is probably over the moon. He's just got $96 million, and he's going to play in Vegas, which is apparently one of the best places in the NHL to play. Like, no question at all. So he's probably thrilled. Great place to raise his young son, for his family, for everybody, and it's tax-free. That doesn't hurt. For Toronto, we get a third-line center again. We get Scott Laughton. We like Scott Laughton, but we also have Nicolas Roy or Nicholas Roy or Nicholas Roy, whichever it is that works for you. This guy, 15 goals last year, seems like a bang and crash kind of guy. Perfect fit behind John Tavares and Austin Matthews. And so we got options this year. But how will we judge today, right? I know that there are a lot of Leaf fans who are like, oh, I'm so happy to see him go. And I know there are a lot of Leaf fans too, a lot of Leaf fans who are devastated. I got to tell you something personally. My daughter's first hockey jersey was a Mitch Marner jersey. That was the first guy that she identified with. And I think it's sad because now I got to tell her that he doesn't play for the team anymore. Now she's 6. She'll get over it. I got over Doug Gilmour. She's going to have to get over Mitch. It does happen. Heartbreak's a part of being a Leaf fan. But I wanted to go through some of the tweets that you sent me on this subject today because I put out there, okay, we can't really judge today on today. We need time. And I said on Twitter, hey, listen, what do you think this is going to look like in 5 years? And I wanted to read some of the responses just from my phone and react to them. So the first one I'm going to read is Dan the Anvil. And Dan the Anvil says, our best years ended then. So what will we say in 5 years? Dan says, our best years ended then. It's not hard to see how Dan doesn't have a point here. This is potentially, skill-wise, the best player the Leafs have ever had. Like, no disrespect to Austin Matthews and William Nylander and whatever. The type of skating, puck movement, vision that Mitch Marner had and has, and that Vegas is getting, and that Jack Eichel is getting, boy, can't really just replace that. Brad Treliving said there's not a tree with Mitch Marner's on it that you can just kind of pluck a new one. So, yeah, that's entirely possible, Dan. It's a bit of a pessimist take, though. Liam Kinsler says, turns out this guy actually just couldn't cut it in the playoffs. So that one's interesting. You know, you look at Mitch Marner's points per game in the playoffs, and it's one of the highest in Leafs history. However, if you look at the point spread, especially in games 5, 6, and 7, and by the way, he's not alone here. Matthews, Tavares, and Nylander haven't exactly been shooting the lights out in those games. It ain't great. It's not great. And so what will be very interesting is when Vegas goes to the playoffs next year, and I think we all think they will, how does he perform there? How does he work in that system? They obviously have a plan for this. They've clearly talked about it. They might have tampered about it. So can Mitch and his game work within Vegas's system so that he has the best sort of performance possible? He's going to need bang and crash guys. If Vegas are able to hang on to guys like Ivan Barbashev, I think that kind of bodes well. Let's get on to the next one. Albert Starks III. There are 3 Albert Starks. Okay. It was the best for both parties. I like this take. Clearly, it's been like 18 months, to me anyway, since Mitch enjoyed playing here. I'm sure he enjoyed it on the ice with his teammates and that sort of thing, but I think he got tired of the rest of it. It's not for everybody. This is an intense media market. Now, intense, you grade on a curve because Toronto hockey media is very mild compared to Knicks, Lakers, Miami Heat, Chicago Bulls basketball media, New York Yankees baseball, Real Madrid, Liverpool FC, and on and on and on and on. Those media markets, any NHL player would just melt, let's be honest. But this gives him an opportunity to go to a place where he doesn't have to deal with us, at least as much. He might just want a bit of a quieter life. There are a lot of players that do. I don't understand it fully. I like the guys that want the spotlight, but I'm a Leaf fan. You're going to be in the spotlight. Sometimes the spotlight burns a little bit. For the Toronto Maple Leafs, this is not like a tangible thing. This might be a whole bag of coke, but bear with me on this. When you're on a team, like you're at work and you're in a team environment, and you know one of your co-workers doesn't like it there. You know that, right? You can feel that. When you're playing on a sports team and one of your teammates doesn't like the coach and doesn't want to do what the coach says, I'm not saying that's what Mitch Marner did. I'm just saying, you know that. You can feel that. When you're in a relationship with somebody, it's a friendship, maybe your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, and they don't want to be there, you can feel that. And it was pretty clear for a while, Mitch wasn't happy here. He's kind of done. And I wonder if that allows the dressing room, even though they love this guy, all his teammates loved him. I wonder if that allows the dressing room to just turn the page, move on to the next chapter, not denigrate the guy, but is there a little bit of okay, that chapter is over, we can move on, and we're going to create a team of guys that really do want to be here and embrace the media part of it. Hockey Cini says, why couldn't he win a cup in Toronto but won a Conn Smythe in Vegas? So basically the Phil Kessel. Now, Phil Kessel didn't win the Conn Smythe, but he should have friggin' won the Conn Smythe. I watched that. No disrespect to Sidney Crosby, but that was Phil's Conn Smythe. So he immediately leaves Toronto and wins a cup in Pittsburgh. And, we get our faces rubbed in it. Although, I have to be honest with you, I was always a Phil Kessel fan. I was not part of the Toronto media that was dunking on him. I thought he was our best player, and the rest of the guys around him weren't that good. Doesn't matter. it's very likely that Mitch Marner goes to Vegas and absolutely hits a new gear. Like whatever you saw in Toronto, he's even better because he's had the opportunity to move on and turn the page and have a new chapter and just play free. Do you remember Mitch Marner in 16-17? Do you remember Mitch Marner in 17-18 and 18-19 as well? Man, that guy played free. He just enjoyed himself. Steve used to say that, I remember at his LFRs, he used to talk about how he used to just pound Mountain Dew and get out there. And he really was like so spectacular and amazing to watch. And maybe he can grab a little bit back of that energy again that had been and maybe he can grab a little of that energy again that was gone in Toronto for so long. There might be a resurgent Mitch Marner in a way that we're not prepared for. And I hope you as a Leaf fan are prepared for the fact that when he does win a Conn Smythe or Stanley Cup, our noses will be rubbed in it. Now, Kenny Burley says, we offered him the sun and the moon to stay home. The largest deal in franchise history. Goodbye. See you later. Deuces. Now, I don't know what it's like to be offered $13.5 million over 8 years. That's over $100 million. I have no idea what I would do in that position. But one thing I do know is that I have walked away from some money in my life because I was unhappy. And I'm not talking it's anything near like sniffing what Mitch Marner made more in a day than I made in a year. But I've walked away from really good jobs that I wasn't happy with. I've walked away from good money because I wasn't going to be happy in that role. And part of being an adult is making decisions like that. We did offer him $13.5 million reportedly over 8 years. Well more than Vegas did. Even with the tax advantages or whatever, he would have made more had he stayed in Toronto and accepted that deal. I think it was in February. But the reality was he wasn't happy. Do you want a guy who's paid that much who isn't happy? I think Mitch Marner did Toronto a favor by not accepting that deal. Coral Grimes says, in 5 years, we'll probably look at it similarly to how we looked at the Kadri trade. You hate to see it, but it had to happen. Now, I will die on that hill. Kadri, after being suspended 2 years in a row in the playoffs, the Leafs had to do something. Boy, it was painful what they got in return. Like, they didn't have to do that trade, but they did. And he goes on. The first year with Colorado, suspended again in the playoffs. People are like, wow, see, we're vindicated. It happened again. And then the next year he goes and plays an integral role in Colorado's championship. He had like 100 points, signed that big deal in Calgary afterwards. Nazem Kadri is another great example of a one that got away. And frankly, one that probably needed to. I think in this case, we kind of have to look at Mitch a little bit like that. It seemed like it didn't work for the Leafs. It seemed like it didn't work for Mitch. So it's sad, but it also probably eventually was going to happen anyway. So why not now? Clayman V12 says, in 5 years, we'll just be like, it's been 5 years? How many Stanley Cups will Vegas have in between that? Next one. Juicer93 says, okay, in 5 years, we're going to be saying, I wonder what would have happened if they ran it back one more time. Guys, listen. That's the one thing I can't relate to. Run it back one more time. You can sell me on the fact that the Leafs are worse off without Mitch Marner. That is a given. You can sell me on it's a chapter turned. Absolutely, it's a given. You can also sell me on the fact that Mitch will maybe get better in Vegas. I kind of believe that. You can also sell me on the fact that the Leafs might be better moving on in their own way. I can be sold on that. You can't sell me on, hey, we've seen the same thing 8 years in a row, which is this group does not work well in the playoffs. Whatever it is, it's not just Mitch, it's Austin, it's Willie, it's John, it's their surrounding teammates. There is something about this mix that doesn't work. I have to applaud Mitch for at least recognizing it and going, I am going to remove myself from the situation. Because it seemed like the Toronto Maple Leafs were bound and determined to do it again up until pretty recently. And I have to ask, is that not insanity? What are we doing here? So I'm sure there will be people that ask that question. I'm sure there will be people that ponder it. I have to be honest with you. I will not be one of them. It's time to move on. Josh Jelly 8 says, in 5 years, we'll be saying, oh, he was traded. Vegas is ruthless. That is true. This is a team that traded Marc-Andre Fleury for nothing after he won the Vezina. Success is the expectation in Vegas. Talked about it on the podcast today. I got some pushback from sources and stuff and who are upset with me for saying it. But the thing about Vegas, maybe you don't have the same fan pressure, right? Maybe you don't have the same media pressure. You do have management pressure. You have ownership pressure. Bill Foley's not messing around. There are guys who are die-hard Vegas Golden Knights, and they will punch you out the door as soon as they don't think you're useful to them anymore. That's the way that management group operates. So Jack Eichel, who is due for a big fat extension probably sometime this summer, I would think. Mitch Marner, whatever's left of Mark Stone, because he's only got a couple years left. Ivan Barbashev, Tomas Hertl, William Karlsson, Shea Theodore, all these guys, if they can't get it done, you can guarantee there will be changes. And that's the way it kind of works in pro sports. That's just not the way it's worked in Toronto. It's like, you can't get it done. Well, just try again next year. It's all good. That ain't how Vegas operates. I do think that is going to be a factor. Maybe not in year 1, but year 3, 4, 5, if things have started not to happen, it could be a conversation piece for sure. Mike23 Dreamer says in 5 years, he'll still be the most hated Leaf of all time. Mike, I know the emotions are raw. And I think for a lot of people watching this, they're like, yeah, that's how I feel. Can I just suggest that with the passage of time, feelings change. The bad times kind of fade away. You remember the good times. And I think Mitch, whether or not he's a guy that ends up on Legends Row, I personally don't think he will, or has his jersey retired. Again, he's a top 10 scorer of all time in a Leafs jersey. I don't know if that's enough to have his jersey retired. What I do know is Toronto got over friggin' Vince Carter. And he left like a complete a-hole. No doubt about it. Did Mitch do that? No. Mitch said, I'm not going to engage in negotiations with you. I want to test free agency. Ultimately, he wanted to go to Las Vegas. But did he flip the Leafs a middle finger on the way out? No, he didn't do that. Vince did. People forget that. But it's been 20 years, and people remember the dunks and the fact that he put Toronto on the map. I think there will be things about Mitch that people go, man, that was my kid's first jersey. That was my first jersey. He stopped and autographed something for me. I was at his charity event. I think this is a guy that one day, the Leafs organization, Mitch Marner, and the fans, the Holy Trinity, will have a come together and go, you know what? It didn't end the way we wanted it to. We didn't get the job done, but we're grateful for the time that we had. That's a long time in the future. There's a lot of right now. But I think ultimately 5, 10 years from now, that's where this is headed. And frankly, from my perspective, I wish him the best. I don't know him. I've never met him. But I feel like he gave us a lot of entertainment. And for me, who's a content creator here in Toronto, a lot of great content, a lot of great things to talk about. So I think that's how it's going. I'm curious on your comments in this video, what you think of this. Steven Lorentz wants to be a Leaf. Mitch Marner no longer does. Sorry. So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts on this video are. I want to know what you think people will say about this trade today in 5 years. Hit me up in the comments. Give it to me straight. Don't sugarcoat it. And I want to come back to this in 5 years and go, okay, 5 years has passed. What do we think now? Have you changed your mind?